the media is doing everything it can, I guess, to either shame you or I don't quite know how to characterize some of the things that I've seen, especially from the likes of Whoopi Goldberg and some of the folks over on MSNBC. But Donald Trump has kind of had enough. He got a little testy with CBS News. He's suing ABC News and George Stephanopoulos. Well, now he's suing CBS News as well, ladies and gentlemen. And he's suing CBS for a staggering amount of money. Really staggering amount of money, actually $10 billion, which is, to put this in perspective, like there's no way CBS is worth $10 billion. The parent company, Paramount, that owns CBS News, is worth like $8 billion in market cap. So this is a lawsuit that, if ever got to third base or had a home run, would actually put the company entirely out of business. It's going to be tricky for him because he's got to basically really, really prove intent here. And I call it like it is. You know that. And the truth of the matter is CBS News has some wiggle room to edit interviews. It's one of the reasons why I've told you this. Jack Welch, former CEO, now deceased, of GE, told me he would never do an interview on tape because he wanted to do it live. He wanted to preserve the record for what he actually said, because they can do all kinds of crazy things in the edit room. And in the case of CBS News, they really lent a helping hand because the woman has such terrible word salad, she can't get from point A to point B without going from like A to Z in the middle. So what did they do? They cut up her answer, sliced and diced it to try and make it sound more meaningful. It still didn't, frankly. It still didn't have much meaning to it. And Donald Trump is alleging that this is a form of election interference, etc. Technically, it's going to be hard for him because advertising rules really don't necessarily apply to the news stations in the same way. But if nothing else, it's a heck of a story, right? Because it would completely put him out of business. Watch him here at a rally.
How about 60 Minutes, the way they protected Kamala? She gave an answer. Think of it. 60 Minutes, CBS, and they ought to lose their license and they ought to take it off the air. It's the biggest. How about this? She gives an answer that was cognitively a mess, right? She gives an answer that was grossly incompetent. They removed the entire answer and put another answer in there. Where the hell? They don't do that with anybody that I've ever heard. With me, they do the opposite. I give them a gorgeous, full-flowing, magnificent, beautiful answer. I call it the weave, right? Always get right back to the right place, but you cover a lot of territory this way. But you give a beautiful answer, and then what they do is they take pieces of it out, and all of you say, what the hell happened to my beautiful answer? They do the opposite. And that's bad too, but that's not like this. They took her entire answer out, threw it out, and they said, this looks terrible. And they put a new answer in. I mean, that's the biggest scandal, in my opinion, because that's election interference. That's the biggest scandal in the history of broadcasting. Right? The biggest scandal in the history of broadcasting, in my opinion. We'll see what happens. They're being sued. They're being sued by a lot of people. No, they should lose their license for that, right? The fake news is protected. How dare he say that? Why would he ever say lose it? They took her answer, threw it out, and gave her a new answer, and they're trying to defend it. Boy, can you imagine if that happened with me? It would be over. The electric chair. And by the way, does anybody have any doubt that they worked with her campaign to get rid of that stupid answer? She's a mess. She's a cognitive mess, and nobody wants to talk about it. And we can't have 4 more years. We had 4 years of it. We can't take another 4 years of it, can we?
Well, a lot of people are saying, no, we can't take 4 more years of it. We can't take the inflation. We can't take all of the challenges that go with that inflation. We can't take the border situation being what it is. But again, we'll see how it all shakes out. He's doing lots of rallies. He's trying to get everybody interested in this last moment.
Seven massive rallies in front of 40, 50, 60,000 people. I mean, so these rallies are drawing massive crowds, but 7 rallies in effectively 36 hours. And I think that's the stamina that Americans want, right? I mean, that's the energy that Americans want out of our commander in chief. And it's exactly what the current administration doesn't have. It's exactly what Kamala hasn't had this entire campaign.
No, Kamala actually has done 2 rallies. So compare and contrast, if you would. That's Eric Trump talking about his dad. Reminder to subscribe to the channel. Reminder to be here because we will be live tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, starting at 7. It could be a long night. Polymarket out with new polls. And again, I think this is an important one to watch. Let me try and show you exactly what we're looking at here. Trump at 59%, Harris at 41%. This all coming as we increasingly see so many polls in this deadlock, right? You have the New York Times Siena poll showing this deadlock, if you would, or this really super duper even environment. And yet, Polymarket, when money's on the line, and it's not the only betting market showing you this, that he's ahead in those polls. So what's really going on? Well, I want to share with you the Marist poll. I forgive me, incorrectly reported earlier in the show that he was ahead. I was just looking at some of the data that come in and I was sort of speed reading it, and forgive me for that. He's not actually in the Marist poll. He's actually not ahead except with independents. He's ahead with independents, which was what I meant, by 7 points. So if he's ahead with independents, is that not the group that you want to court? Don't you think that all the knocking of women, that aren't intelligent around Trump, whether it be from Mark Cuban or Kathy Hochul trying to say you're anti-American if you're a Republican, or even Joe Biden himself with this little number that I don't think he's ever going to live down. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that moves the needle on the margin in the 11th hour.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Yeah, okay. So, unconscionable, un-American, all of that stuff, that's how they view half the country. And so when push comes to shove, if Marist independents are showing a lead of 7 points, I mean, that's with independents. These are usually the people that are like afraid to say, yeah, hey, I'm going to vote for Trump. These are the people that are like trying to be all things, right? To all folks a little bit, not to knock on independents. Technically, I'm a registered independent because I don't like the idea of having to subscribe to any party. I really like the idea of having my independence. But I look at it and say, hey, you know what, Kamala, if you want to cut taxes for everyone, if you want to actually do things to shore up our border, if you want to ensure peace, if you want to have more economic prosperity, then I'd be there. But you're not, because none of your policies actually embody that. And I know exactly what we would get, which is more of the same. And we can't handle more of the same. We can't handle more of the inflation that she's been dishing out. I mean, can you imagine this? Can you imagine this? Another 4 years, what happens then? I mean, look, all the more reason I remind you to go to 76 Research, 76research.com. That's my company I created with a very dear friend. And look, we've had tremendous success. I'm not here to tout that, but just to remind you, okay, I will. What the heck? Consumer pick up more than 20%, financial pick, utility pick, real estate pick. You can see these numbers here. Another materials pick up 17%. The market was up 5.9% in the same period of time. Our median stock price is up 10.8%. So the idea is you want to be part of that economy that's participating in this success. You want to actually have an opportunity to grow your savings and your holdings regardless of what happens in Washington, D.C. I do think that she ultimately is not a good thing for the markets. She's not a good thing for the economy. It's one of the reasons why, if you look at the internals in the market right now, I think it's telling you something. I really do. I mean, when I look at the price of Bitcoin, which had topped $70,000, what is that about? It's about a bet that Donald Trump is actually going to win this thing, because Bitcoin investors are very much, wedded to this idea of less regulation, et cetera. And he's been very pro-Bitcoin. But I would say that, right now, as we go into the big day tomorrow, we have a market that's off slightly, down 229 points at this moment on the Dow. S&P down slightly, down, a 0.1% or so. We'll see. I think that people are sort of watching and waiting to see how this is all going to shake out. But I would just remind you that we're looking at a betting market that still is increasingly positive, despite what we saw over the weekend, in part thanks to that Iowa poll, the Iowa and Seltzer poll that has everyone kind of worried. And I'm just here to tell you, you shouldn't be. You just shouldn't be that worried by that poll, because I think it's an outlier. I really, really, really do. Just to remind you, this is the Des Moines, not the North Carolina. Forgive me, North Carolina he's actually up in, but in Ann Seltzer's poll out of the Des Moines Register, 44% to 47%. New York Times, again, still pretty darn steady. So the question becomes, what actually happens? Are you going to see turnout? Are you going to see turnout there on Tuesday? I want to share with you what one of my friends, Charlie Kirk, is actually saying. He has a lot of worries, if you would, about male turnout. He doesn't think that you're going to see enough men in the 11th hour. And so he put out a tweet. If I can find it, I will show you here, because it's relevant. We'll see what ultimately happens. I mean, talking about really knocking their legs out from under them. I mean, if men don't show up, I just don't know what to tell them. They've got to get to the polls, and they've got to protect themselves, their livelihood, the economy, etc. But Charlie putting this out, and again, he writes, early vote has been disproportionately female if men stayed home. Kamala's president. It's that simple. If you want a vision of the future, if you want Kamala's voice, I won't read the rest. You can go and look at it forever. He made a few things kind of wise. Then don't vote. So the point being, Charlie, you got to vote. You got to vote. And it has nothing to do actually with her voice, although we may not like it much, and everything to do with the policies. Okay, the policies themselves. Because if you have bad policies, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get nothing more but the same bad, awful economy that you've had. What did we have recently? How many jobs were added to this economy? And how many of them were actually like real jobs? It turns out there were 12,000 jobs added to the economy last month, and they were all government jobs. It was a lousy jobs report. You got a big country, hundreds of millions of people here, and you're only adding 12,000 jobs? I mean, Kamala, this is wild. This is terrible. This is not good news for you. So again, as we look at the last minute polls, I remind you to go, keep everything in perspective. I remind you to make sure that you get everybody you can, and their brother and their cousin and everybody else, out to vote, because it will come down to election day. It really will. We need to see that kind of turnout there.